I'm sorry, I'm a bit arrogant. You have a top manager.
Let me talk.
I think I'm a special one.
Time to go! Let me talk.
Everywhere you go, there's meat pies, and I'm surprised that Americans haven't embraced this, because this could be like the greatest thing on earth.
You are now listening to the Hat Trick with the Meat Pies podcast, your podcast for most things footy and few things pie. This is Paul presenting the Hat Trick today, a segment where we discuss the three most memorable matches that our guests have watched, attended, or even played in. Today we have our very own Forrest Zimmerman joining us as a special guest. Forrest, it seems like you're coming off a huge weekend in top form. And do I get that correct?
Oh man, one and done. I'll put it that way. This weekend was a big reminder. I am well past my prime. I spent all day yesterday recovering, but yeah, I went to the Waste Management Open in Phoenix all day Saturday, which is just a huge party on a golf course, more or less. But it was a blast. And then I saw Amine in concert later that night after a much needed 2-hour nap, and then woke up and it was Super Bowl Sunday, which is like my version of Christmas, more or less. And slugged a bunch of Coors, downed a bunch of wings. Great time. But yeah, definitely don't got it like I used to back in our 80 pie days.
Super Bowl is a huge day, even for non-drinkers. I'm still choking down about half of a Costco pizza I'm taking back from the Super Bowl party. That's lasted me a couple days. I got more for tomorrow as well.
We got Costco pizzas too with the wings.
Yeah.
It was a spread. My girlfriend, as he was about to toss the leftover wings that are still at her place today, I said, absolutely not. I'll take care of those. Don't you worry.
Pop those in the freezer and forget about them.
Yeah, one of the two.
Waste Management looks so fun. The Super Bowl is always fun. Before I get into your top 3 footy matches ever, where does Waste Management rank among the most memorable sports events you've been to, excluding soccer? Because we're going to get into that later. Waste Management seems really unique. Maybe not top like the best sports events you've been to, but it's got to be up there with some of the most unique.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I've been really lucky to go to a lot of amazing sporting events in my life. That's kind of my dad and I's thing that we've always done together, is just go for the biggest sports experience there is. But there will be more on that later in this hat trick. But yeah, like the Open is super unique because it's a huge deal in Phoenix, and like probably like one of the biggest events in the city the whole year. And a little spoiler alert, during our interview with Sporting KC's owner Greg Madej last week, Gabe and he actually asked me when I said I was from Phoenix if I was going to the Open that weekend. Like he already knew, and
He knows.
He's a local Kansas Cityan, so not any connection to the state of Arizona. So it's really unique. It's kind of everyone. It's like 250,000 people on a golf course, just mostly absolutely hammered. And the weather was gorgeous. It was a little cold the couple weeks before, but it turned and was like 75, 80 over the weekend. Just so nice. Yeah. And it's interesting because golf is kind of this gatekeepy, old boys club sport where there's all this decorum and etiquette. And the Open is just like the polar opposite of all those values. So it's kind of fun to just see that in action. And like so many of my law school classmates went. Like I ran into one today who I didn't see there, but showed me pictures of him like sunglasses on, just passed out in the grass his friends took of him. And I was like, sounds like you had a good time, buddy.
No, it's so fun. Sport needs that. It needs that like I feel like it's for the people, like
It is.
golf doesn't strike me. I'm not a huge golfer, so I might get some backlash for this. Golf doesn't strike me as a sport that's like for the people. Waste
No.
management seems for the people.
It is, and it's cool because I'm pretty sure it's like the first PGA Tour event of their season. So it's
Mm.
like a nice kickoff, and like, of course, there are like detractors, the old guys that think it's disrespectful to the sanctity of the sport, but like, you know,
Yeah.
like it's such a good time, and I feel like it is really good for the sport. Like my girlfriend and a couple of her friends who don't give two shits about the game of golf came out just because it was a fun time, and I feel like it's good for the game, just in like keeping a different age group's interests in it.
Yeah, and engages that young audience, hooks them in with the ice cold Rockies.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I'm sure you might have seen on Twitter, there was a hole in one. I
Yeah.
didn't see it. And it was pretty cool, like coincidentally on 16, which is the one hole with like a huge grandstand around it. That's kind of the famous Phoenix Open hole. So for the hole in one to be on that one and the crowd going crazy, dumping beer from all over the decks, it was electric.
No, that epitomizes electric.
Yeah, yeah, big time.
Well, that's a great story. I love hearing about that. I'm also really, really interested to get into this and hear your answers to these questions because, not to expose you, but despite not following soccer for the longest time, probably the shortest out of the meat pies, I think you've probably been to the most big games and some amazing games in that. So, with that being said, maybe give a brief intro to how you got into soccer, and then I'd love to hear about the first match in your hat trick.
Yeah, so I played like one season of like pee-wee soccer when I was probably, I don't know, 5 or 6, and I hated it.
Mhm.
I was boring, like wasn't really my thing, and like my family was always a football family anyways. So after that one season, it was off my radar, like pretty much for good. I would say it came back around 2010 for the World Cup. I pretty vividly remember, it's weird. I remember watching the World Cup and I remember some of like the big moments. Like I remember James's goal for Colombia and how his tournament kind of put him on the map for like the world in a lot of ways. I remember it being in South Africa. I think I was kind of roped into it because my middle school Spanish teacher, Mr. Peterson, one of my favorite teachers of all time, would have like a Spanish song of the week. And we would like play it at the beginning of class, and he would like force us to sing along, which like a seventh grader is like the most cringe thing ever. But like one of the songs was Waka Waka by Shakira,
Oh yeah.
which is like all-time classic. Spanish version is so good. It was like the official song or whatever of the World Cup. So we kind of like knew about it, and like would watch like the matches. And I remember Van Persie's goal, the diving header, and just watching like the final of the Netherlands and Spain. Sorry to bring it up in front of you. But yeah, I just remember kind of getting an inkling of the magic that was the sport, especially at an international level. I still didn't know a single thing about the club world of soccer. Um, like didn't even know the leagues, like didn't really know about Champions League. Like none of it like meant anything to me, but international footy I thought was super cool, and it was kind of fun to watch the US play like a little bit too. Like I would always kind of follow it from there. So if I'm gonna pinpoint a match, it would be that 2010 final was kind of the initial exposure.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the beautiful parts of soccer to me is there are multiple forums where it can be enjoyed and taken in and watched and loved. And I think most people's introduction to soccer is probably through the international stage. It's just amazing how players get to represent their country. You can tell it means more to the players. It means more to the fans. It's insane. I don't know how this next World Cup's going to go. It's going to be weird, but regardless of the controversy surrounding it, I would be lying if I said I still wasn't a little excited to see those teams compete in what I believe to be like the greatest sporting event that the world has.
Of course. No, definitely. Earlier this week, it might have been when we were recording and maybe talking about the England team or something. And it just like hit me. I was like, oh yeah, like there's a World Cup in December.
Yeah.
Like I kind of completely forgot about it. But it is kind of like great, fun reminder and like definitely something to look forward to no matter what.
No, totally. So that Netherlands-Spain final, sneak peek of my hat trick. That's one of my matches, but I'm not talking about my experience there. Is that going to be your first match in the hat trick, or is that your intro to the game itself?
I'll say that's my first match in the hat trick. Yeah.
Nice. What do you remember specifically about that game? I know it kind of, you weren't super like, I don't know. I have very emotionally attached memories to that game.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to how you saw it as more neutral or as neutral as it gets really at that point. To that match and what it meant and how important it was, stuff like that.
I don't know why, but I was a huge Spain hater.
Yes.
Like, I don't know why, but like I was totally rooting for the Netherlands. And I think it was just because of how icy their kits were.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you know, like the Iran, I was like, those are sweet kits. I mean, I remember Wesley Sneijder, Robin van Persie. Was Ruud van Nistelrooy on that team, or was that one after? Was his last one 06?
I think his last one might have been 06. I don't really remember him on that team. I really don't remember him in that jersey is the way I think of it.
Yeah.
Arjen Robben choked like literally a game-winning moment in that game, but
I don't remember that weirdly, but I kind of got into the Dutch players. I was like, these guys are cool, like jerseys are fire, like I'll run with them. And I don't know, I kind of probably felt with Spain because they were like that was such a dominant, like one of the most dominant international runs of all time was that Spain team. So I was like, probably just kind of rooting against them because they were the favorites.
No, totally. I mean, if I'm correct, they won the 2008 Euros, they won the 2010 World Cup, and then they won the 2012 Euros as well, I think. And then the 2014 Cup was won by Germany.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, like that run of the Euros, World Cup Euros was like definitely one of the best ever. And now, like, as a more seasoned fan, I definitely appreciate that team. I still don't hate on that Spain team, but in the moment, I was just strangely really rooting for the Netherlands, and it was very disappointing.
Yeah.
To like lose in that fashion. So that's kind of what I remember about it. But otherwise, it's a pretty scant memory. I have no idea like where I was watching it.
I was gonna say the next thing I was gonna ask is like, was it an occasion or did someone just like flip it on for whatever?
It was probably like, I don't even know, because it would have been in the summer. Like, what does one do in the summer in middle school, you know?
Play Skyrim, baby.
Yeah, like just kind of random things. So it was probably just like, I would assume in the morning if it was in South Africa. And then I'm sure it was my dad who instigated it, because he wasn't ever like a big footy fan, but it definitely wasn't my mom. And I feel like my dad, like I said, our thing that, you know, he's fostered like my whole life has been, he's big on experiences, and especially with sports. So I'm sure he was the one where he was like, hey, like, I don't care about footy, but like this is a big deal. So like we should watch it. Like I want to watch it.
No, yeah, I see him. I feel like he cares more now, especially I feel like he's
So
kind of
much more.
attached to the men's national team, the US men's national team.
Yeah.
But he's also a guy where I could definitely see being like, I don't really care about this, but I recognize it's like a global phenomenon and like this huge event. And purely because of that, we should turn it on.
Right. That's it. Like, I don't know how much of the rest of the tournament he watched, but I feel like if it was the summer, you know, it was probably on. I probably flipped games on just to like watch random countries because I thought they were cool. Like, not that I knew any of their players. I was like, oh, like Germany, like my last name is German. I'm of German heritage. Like, let's watch them play, you know, whoever. And
Yeah.
so it was very like surface level interest. But yeah, I guess when you're in middle school on summer break, like it's just kind of whatever's on, you know, in between video game sessions or something.
It's so funny you say that because, and I want to move on to our second hat trick match and after this, but it's really funny you say that because for me, like my family, I think the World Cup before this as well, because that's when I really started to be like wanting to watch soccer rather than like doing it passively with my family. Like we, back when we were like using, like, it's crazy to say, but like we taped every single game on a VCR, and we rewatched every single game of that World Cup because it was the summer. Like if we couldn't watch them, we taped them. It was like towards the end of school, I think, like in June. If we couldn't be there to watch them, we would have like the VCR set up to tape it, and we would just watch like 5 hours of soccer when we got home. And like we watched every single group stage match and every single knockout match of that World Cup, culminating of probably the biggest heartbreak in my entire life. And we're going to move on. You talked about this tradition that you've cultivated with your dad. I've been witness to it a couple times. Once we went and saw Boise State play in a bowl game in Las Vegas, which was great fun. What are some of the other matches he's taken you to? I'm assuming this is going to lead into your second hat trick match.
It is. And I guess now that I'm thinking about it, now I have 4 matches in mind.
You can say one later. You can save probably the worst one or the least memorable one for later.
So, yeah, you're right. So the next, it's a joint one. It'll be 2 and 3. So fast forward to 2014, which was, I believe this was the summer after our sophomore year of high school.
Correct.
So the next World Cup was in Brazil. My dad was selling orthopedic medical devices for a company called Synthes that like a year before was like bought by Johnson & Johnson, J&J, you know, one of the biggest companies in the world. And so also he was dating this Brazilian woman at the time. And, you know, of course, stars aligned, World Cup in Brazil, dating a Brazilian woman who still has like a house or something down there, working for J&J, which happens to be like one of the primary sponsors of the World Cup. So he's looking into it. And I didn't really think much of it, like didn't really care about soccer, like still wasn't watching it or like following it. Like same deal, like I was gonna watch the World Cup anyways, but so like at least my interest wasn't like, oh, I'm gonna turn on if it's on. Like I was gonna actively do it, but I wasn't following like the Prem or anything by this time. Um, but he was like, hey, like J&J employees, there's like kind of a allotment of tickets for them since they're the main sponsor, but like, you know, you're competing with like every person on earth who works for Johnson and Johnson, which is like presumably a ton of people. Like I don't actually
Yeah.
know,
Probably
but
like hundreds of thousands.
yeah, like probably hundreds of thousands of people. But like he's like, yeah, I'm gonna look into it. Like, you know, maybe it'd be cool if we could snag like a group stage game or two and go down there. I'm like, yeah, for sure, sounds good. So he puts in, like, he's looking and he's like, yeah, I'm looking at the final and the semifinal right now, but you know, unfortunately they're like unavailable, they're all sold out. And I almost want to ask him to tell me this story again because I think he like just clicked on that like link for the semifinal and the final anyways, even though it said they were unavailable. And it took him to a screen and they were. And he was like, oh shit. And
check out.
like before it crashes.
Oh,
He was
God.
like, oh my God. So he told me, he's like, dude, I got us tickets to the World Cup final in Rio and the World Cup semi, which was in Belo Horizonte. And I was like, what? I'm like, that's unreal. So like it was kind of the same deal as like his previous attitude. I was like, don't like really follow footy that closely, but like that's gonna be one of the sickest things of all time. Like, because I understood by now, like it's a world event. It's like one of the like greatest, if not the greatest sporting event there is. And like we somehow like got unbelievably lucky that there was still tickets or like there was some glitch. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know how it happened, but it did. So we flew down there in the summer in July. We're there for a couple weeks. And so by now I was like fully like a Germany supporter, like I said, through my heritage. Obviously rooted for the US too, but like
Yeah.
not really comparable international programs. But like I feel like you would agree with this. Like every American kid kind of does that. Is like you root
Oh,
for the
yeah.
US, but then you pick like your real team, usually based on like where your family's heritage lies or some other kind of random connection. But like every American kid kind of has those two like fandoms. And I think
No,
that
completely.
it's kind of a funny, interesting thing to think about because I think it'll be interesting to see when the US actually gets really good and could maybe compete with the Germanys and Netherlands and, you know, Louis France
Mhm.
someday. Like we'll probably have been rooting harder for those European teams for a lot longer, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like a strange conundrum. But anyways, so we get to the semifinal in Belo Horizonte, and it's Germany, Brazil. And I'm like, damn, this is awesome. I get to see Germany, which was like maybe the greatest Germany team of all time. Like, I think I was talking to my good law school buddy Matt about it because he was over. We were watching the Neymar doc together. He's a big Chelsea fan. We'll leave it at that. But we were actually going because I was randomly telling him about this because the Neymar doc does cover this game. And he was like, I remember where I was for this game. And I'm like, Actually, I do too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And we went through that whole team sheet for both teams, and it's just ridiculous, like legends after legends. But it was really sad and tough because we knew and appreciated how much pressure was on this Brazil team. Like you could feel it like in the country and like the couple of cities we were in. Like they were hosting, like this was Neymar's like first real like World Cup with them. Like he was like 22 or something, like global starlet. They had a really good squad. And then he, had that back injury. I think an also very underrated part that is kind of lost in history is they didn't have Thiago Silva for that game either.
He was out on a red card, right?
Yeah, it was either that or like a yellow accumulation or
Yeah.
something like really like disappointing. And they might have had like one other key injury. I don't remember, but yeah, like two of their best players on the pitch were out. And then like that Germany team just kind of went to work. Like, and it was crazy because I will say like two of my biggest takeaways. I had my dad like shut me up quick because I was like totally cheering for Germany.
Oh no.
And he was like, bro, we got to get out of here alive. Like, you remember that, right?
Like this
but
isn't college football, kid.
no, serious business. So after the first goal, he was like, cut it out. Like, and I was like, he's right. So I didn't feel unsafe, but it's definitely a different concept than American sports, besides like a couple places. Like I would say like Philly, you could compare it to.
Yeah.
Like a Eagles Cowboys game, you might not make it out alive of. But the most amazing thing was we got to our seats like hour and a half before kickoff. Every seat was full. And I've never seen that in like an American stadium, no matter how big the game. And it's just like a cultural difference. Like, Americans are getting their food, like beer or whatever, hanging out, and then they get in right before kickoff. But every single seat was full, well over an hour. Nothing was on the field, nothing was happening. And I was like, damn, that like kind of was a really like initial indicator to me where it was like, whoa, like now it's hitting me how like massive what I'm about to witness is. And then, when the destruction occurred, when I think it was like Germany put in 3 or 4 goals in like an 8-minute span around like the 20th minute and just kind of like blew the doors off. And obviously you knew like it was over, and they didn't stop it. 7-1 will be in football history forever. But like just seeing like the grown ass men like sobbing around us like was the kind of second indicator of, wow, this is even like almost above their life. Like we say like football is life here, and it is for a lot of people, but I was like, whoa, like these people are like gonna be probably like kind of traumatized by this like event. And that was like something I didn't really understand before that. Like the whole stadium, besides like me and my dad, basically were like crying like real tears. And like the Neymar doc and like obviously other footage have kind of shown like a ton of shots of that. So that was crazy. Then goes into the third hat trick, which is joint, was the final.
Before you get it too much into the final,
Okay.
it's interesting you bring up it being a coincidence that your dad was dating a Brazilian girl at the time. he knew exactly what he was doing. Okay, this was
Oh.
planned accordingly. Okay.
Yeah, but I will say, yeah, I guess coincidence wasn't the right word, but I do think regardless of her, he would have like jumped on this for sure.
Oh, you guys were going for sure.
But yeah, I mean that was definitely a convenient outcome.
No, I think it's
It
dude,
made
it's
it
so
easier,
cool.
like I mean, just having like a personal kind of translator, like
Oh
whatever.
no, it's the dream. It's literally the dream.
It
I
was
mean,
cool.
I think it's so cool you got to go in general. It hurts me so much know that you're like, oh, I mean, I don't really care, but I guess I'll go to the World Cup final. Like,
Yeah, no,
it's just crazy that you guys had that opportunity because there are so many people who never like I don't even know if I'll ever get to experience that. It's so insane getting that opportunity, and I'm glad that you've been able to experience it, and you're able to like share it with us because that's so incredibly cool.
no, that's exactly like I made sure I appreciated that in the moment before the trip, after the trip,
Mm-hmm.
like all of the above. My dad was like, you're probably like never like it's gonna be hard to like top this,
Yeah, yeah,
like in terms of like importance. And like obviously since it's every 4 years too, it's just actually rare.
yeah,
He was like, yeah, like this is gonna be like one of the coolest things like in your entire life. Like just
yeah.
understand that. So I was like, I fully agree. So yeah,
Sir, yes, sir.
yes, sir.
Now, tell me a little bit more about the final. I want to know specifically like what's the atmosphere around the stadium? Obviously, we know what happened in the game, but how did you guys experience that? What was that occasion? Like I feel like the way I kind of a tangent, but the way I explain F1 to people, Formula 1 is it's cool. You get to see these fast cars drive around, but the spectacle of it is my favorite part. The fact that it's like the best of the best. There's so much like money that goes into it. It's so huge. The spectacle is so huge, and it doesn't get bigger spectacle wise than the World Cup final. So tell me about that.
It was pretty interesting. So it was in Rio at the Maracanã, like a very historic stadium, but also like very old. I would kind of compare it to like the Rose Bowl. Like it's very cool and historic, but also you're like, damn, this was built in the 50s, you know? Like it's kind of outdated, but like was fine with it, didn't really matter.
It's
Um,
cultured.
right. So it was really interesting because at times and in certain parts, like Brazil is a very dangerous country, but we weren't like feeling unsafe. We're like, we know they're not gonna like let anything bad happen for like literally like the most meaningful possible event that you could
Yeah.
confer upon Brazil. Like, of course not. So they closed down the streets for like I would say at least a 2 mile radius around the stadium.
That's
And
insane.
you had to go through like probably four-ish security checkpoints before you get to like the regular stadium security with the metal detectors. Like they closed down like actual highway. We were walking on like actual highway overpasses and like getting off like on exits.
Take exit 15 to
Yeah, like
enter the
just
Maracana.
though, but it was weird because like a checkpoint would be just like a big line of like a couple dozen military police, like fully armed and like
Yeah, definitely.
outfitted with like all their combat armor. It was wild. So we went through like three or four of those, and they were like they had like dogs or whatever, like couple like metal detectors, maybe. Like they were just, it wasn't super like logistically like, oh, they were patting us down, whatever. We felt like it was more like just a presence known type of thing. And like they were watching for like suspicious activity too, you know. So that there wasn't much of an actual like party atmosphere because it was so like restrictive. But I do kind of remember like 2014 and around those years, like I think that was kind of near like the Boston Marathon bombing and like a couple others that were like kind of similar, you know. So I think that was really on their minds. So it was less of like I don't think they were trying to allow like a huge crowded chaotic area. But I kind of wonder like what other World Cups look like in comparison in the years later.
Right.
And
If it's stricter and
like, is that just how the final is? But like maybe not. But yeah, so went through those checkpoints. Then we got to the regular security gates. That was normal. I mean, it was still very like intensive, like everything out of your pockets, whatever, like wanding you down, patting you down. Then like, yeah, you're in the stadium and you're like, whoa, like this is a huge event. Like there's so many people, like there's press, like you can kind of feel like I for like other events, like I felt this where you kind of get almost like butterflies in your stomach.
totally.
Like you're almost like nervous, even though like you don't know what about, you know,
It's that like nervous excitement. You're like it's like when whatever's going on around you is like physically buzzing. Like I'm not the most spiritual guy, but like I think like if stuff's going on around you, your brain creates this like buzz. Like when
yeah,
I like it's crazy and it physically manifests like in your body.
it does. It's like the coolest, like one of my favorite like feelings to just like remember is because yeah, it's pretty indescribable, but it's very noticeable. You know, you can like just notice it throughout the crowd and throughout the people working, you know, the vendors, like everyone kind of knows. So it was crazy, but it was cool because obviously, you know, it was Germany, Argentina. This crowd was more diverse. Like obviously there weren't really Brazilians there. Um, there were some like young German guys behind us who had like obviously flown all the way out. And there were like kind of plenty of examples of that, which was really cool. There
So
was
cool.
kind of the looming like, what if Argentina wins on their rival's soil? Like the disrespect. And probably the riots that would ensue.
Yeah.
Was pretty wild to think about. That Argentina team was crazy too, of Aguero, obviously Messi, Di Maria, and like probably his prime, like so many ballers on the field.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget like my heart going straight to my throat when this is kind of like the Thiago Silva thing, like kind of lost in history. Like Messi scored this pretty sick solo goal off the wing, but it was offsides. And I don't remember if it was like right before the half or like right after the half. I feel like it was like about halfway through the game. Don't really remember when, but it was a pretty quick offside flag. So it wasn't that like controversial, but like it was one of those weird things in footy where like the whole crowd kind of went crazy, but immediately stopped when the offside flag went up. so that just kind of had everyone on edge for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and that's something you don't really experience watching on TV. It's like even if you don't know they're offsides, it's like there's no one like erupting next to you, you know, like the whole Maracana like erupts with this Messi goal, and then it's like, oh, never mind. And you're like, well, it's
Yeah,
still
and
kind of sick. Like,
it's such a weird like phenomenon of the sport where like, yeah, like the most exciting thing possible, a goal, can be like so quickly wiped out and you have to like emotionally come down. Like it's so weird. But yeah, so everyone was on edge. It was just like a really tense, tight game. There were like no real other chances that I can remember. Like I think we've talked about this before, is like the Super Bowl like finals are in general just kind of played way more tense and tight. Like, you know, every player doesn't want to be like the guy that makes the first mistake
yeah,
that, you know, lets their team down. So everyone's just playing generally more conservative. So this one was exactly that, like hardly any chances. 0-0 after 90 minutes, and then goes to extra time. And our seats were like high up, but like right kind of looking down the touchline. And so we were like looking right down the line when Götze scored the winner, which was such a, even in the moment, I was like, that was a class finish. Like
oh, historic.
historic class finish, like off the chest, controlling it on the volley. Like it was so nice. And I think it was like the 114th minute or something like that. And the guys behind us, I'll never forget, like I jumped out of my seat, my dad jumped out of his seat, like crowd just absolutely erupted. So it was like the whole like nation of Germany was like kind of vindicated in that moment. It was crazy, kind of just feeling like it's just like a lot more to it than like a game-winning three or like game-winning touchdown kind of thing. Like
Yeah,
everyone's passion really came through in that moment, and it was those next like few minutes till the final whistle were like even more tense because they're like, oh my god, you know, what if there's an equalizer? But it unfortunately for Argentina never came, and you know, we stayed, watched the trophy ceremony.
have to. I'm sure a lot of people stayed, right?
Yeah, I mean, every Germany fan there stayed. Honestly, a lot of Argentina fans I remember stayed too. Some were like just so crushed they couldn't move.
Yeah.
Some were like getting in fights. Some like dipped because they didn't want to watch. But
Yeah.
there was definitely like a surprising amount. And I think that kind of goes back to like the culture of like the Brazilian fans being in their like butts in seats over an hour before kickoff. Is like, I don't know if they were like just respecting it or like trying to take in the moment, but definitely a good more people stayed than you would think. Especially when that trophy presentation takes like a very long time.
Mhm.
With like every single player getting the whole trophy and like shaking Angela Merkel's hand. And like I think it was like Dina Rousseff was like the president of Brazil at the time, shaking her hand. Like, yeah, so we obviously stayed, watched that, and yeah, that was really it. So I'll kind of segue this. Once I got like, it was weird. Right when I like got off the plane, I was like, footy is like the coolest thing ever. Like like that, like just
Plane coming back, right?
yeah, like
Yeah.
just getting back from that experience I was like, finally, I get it. Like, I'm converted from the common American fan of like, oh, like soccer's for pussies and like, like it's not like
Yeah.
or it's like super boring and like low scoring. Like after seeing it in person, I was like, I get it. Because when you're there, obviously, like this goes for other sports too. When you're there, the 45 minutes goes by like so quick,
Yeah, so much faster.
so much faster. So it never feels like in any way close to boring. So once I had experienced that, I was like, oh, okay, I totally understand how amazing this sport is. And the cup was in July, Prem starts in August. And that was the era of like NBC Sports having weekend Prem mornings.
Yeah.
And so it was great. Like those were some of the greatest days in high school when wake up, there's whatever Prem match on Saturday and Sunday morning at like 7 or 8 a.m. So I'd wake up like fairly early, watch that or like watch the second half, then like right into the 10 a.m. slate of football. It just kind of like extended like already
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
like sports days. Like I'd be like having a bowl of cereal, like watching like the end of Prem matches, and I got like super into it from that point on. Like it was weird, like that it was like a very specific moment in time. It was a catalyst for like my fandom ever since.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's amazing. It's so cool how, I mean, you see a lot with some of my friends in high school. I think to a lesser extent, obviously, but people frequently use the World Cup as like a launching pad for their fandom. But I think similar to something like March Madness, a lot of people just like watch the World Cup, they watch March Madness, and then they just don't really pay attention. And with soccer, it's tough because it's like they don't pay attention for 4 years. It's not like 1 year and they're college kids. It's like 4 years with players at the top of their game. And so I think it's so amazing how you were able to use that World Cup to launch your fandom into a serious, hobby, a serious interest.
Right.
Probably prompted by the fact that you were able to go to such a historic World Cup. I mean, it's amazing. I want to hear quickly. You can touch on maybe what I just said just a bit, but also as we're closing up this hat trick, I want to hear any honorable mentions you have quickly for matches you've been to, seen, enjoyed.
Couple honorable mentions. I think they might be the only two couple other like professional matches I've been to, because to preface quickly, like I would watch the Prem, like I said, on those weekend mornings, but none of my other friends did. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like my own individual hobby. So I was into it, but when we all met in college and there were finally like other people that cared, that's when it kind of like skyrocketed. And I also got like, I had like FIFA in high school, like that kind of helped grow my knowledge of like players and clubs and whatnot. But the Sounders game, I don't know if you went to this. I don't remember who else was there. Sounders with Gabe and his parents. I don't remember.
Wait, maybe I was there.
It was like one or two of our like friend group, but I don't remember. But it was like a Sounders game. Don't remember at all who they played. Just a random MLS regular season match. Ended 0-0, painfully like boring. Um
Welcome to soccer.
yeah. But that was really interesting because I was like, whoa, like now I understand the difference in level between the MLS and Europe.
Yeah.
because I could just kind of see, like, I never played, so like I'm like the farthest thing from like an expert on like technique and like strategy, but I could just tell like the way they handled the ball and like the vision was just so much slower, and the game was kind of a couple steps slower from the Prem. And I was even thinking that today. I was watching Real PSG in class today because I was bored in property.
'Cause he's
And
a degen.
yeah, total degen. Didn't want to learn about trust. And so I had that on my phone. To be fair, my professor was teaching on Zoom because I think she has COVID. But anyway, so she wasn't really policing, but I was just watching on my phone. I was like, Jesus Christ, like both these teams were just moving the ball like ridiculously fast. And like their link up play was so just smooth. I mean, those are two of the best teams on earth. And I think they both were playing particularly well too, especially PSG was kind of giving it to Real for especially the second half. But that was cool for me as a fan, like that MLS match, just to kind of appreciate like how good the best in the world are. And like I had that experience with football previously, like the difference between like professionals, college players, and high school players, like how huge
Yeah.
the gaps are. So I kind of like looking for those experiences because it does almost kind of humble you as like a fan of like the talent that you're watching. So that was one. And then last summer, the Gold Cup final, boys, in Vegas at Allegiant, first time at the brand new, beautiful Allegiant Stadium. USA Mexico is obviously such a classic rivalry, and it was almost weirdly in a way kind of like the mini 2014 World Cup final with like
Yeah.
team getting a late extra time goal to win a tournament. Like that was so cool. And like that was kind of another like MLS versus Europe moment. And I was like, damn, some of these Mexican players are just so much better. And like
No, it's insane.
we didn't have our full, first team by any means. But yeah, you could kind of see, and I was trying and failing to describe it to my dad. I was like, some of those players in the Mexican midfield are just like way more composed on the ball, like have way more creativity with their service and whatnot than like we didn't. But we just kind of grinded out that win, and that was really fun. And that was just like a great like personal memory of like kind of the last thing I did before law school with all you guys in Vegas where I'm from. Like that was just sick.
No, that's such a good memory, and that game was insane. I wonder how many of us are going to include it in the hat trick because
Yeah.
I'm tempted not to, and I feel like you didn't just because it's like such a shared experience.
Yeah.
But like that would almost not do it justice to how cool that environment was. Another place I felt like I should not celebrate a USA goal.
Yeah, well, because that should be.
I saw some brutal fights that day.
Yeah, some of those fights, people getting slept in the parking lot.
Yeah. Oh God.
But that was another one where my dad was like, "This is at Allegiant. It's our hometown. Our first time." That was I think it should also be said. I think that was the first sporting event at Allegiant Stadium with fans.
Like full capacity or fans full stop?
Period. I think.
Wow.
Because the Raiders season hadn't started yet, and they and UNLV football are the only ones that play there. So I don't think there would have been any other reason to be fans there before that. So that was pretty amazing. And it was still like what would you say, like 80-20 Mexico fans?
Yeah, I think
Like, it
that's
was
pretty
not
accurate. It
particularly
was
funny.
insane.
It
There were
was
so
so
many
loud.
Mexico fans.
Yeah, it was so loud. My dad was chirping all of the Mexican fans around us. And at first I was like kind of freaked out. I was like, oh God, like that's risky. But like by the end of the game, like he has this knack for kind of chirping people, but like towing the line of like being funny, but like kind of like ribbing them a little bit, but like we were all dapping each other up by the end of the game. So it was great. It was such a fun memory. Um, but yeah, that was just like such a cool, intense rivalry, and the USA Mexico kind of never disappoints. I feel like no matter
Mhm.
who's in the team for each side, it's always kind of going to be a battle. So
No, it's amazing. The rivalry is great. It's a good show of what global soccer, global football is all about, and how there's such a good platform for it here at this point. I just see it getting better and better and better. Um, any last second honorable mentions you want to throw in, or does that tie it up?
no, I think that's it. I'm looking forward to adding some more feathers to the cap in the future for sure. Maybe I'll catch a Phoenix Rising FC game one of these days. See how
Yeah.
it delivers. I don't even know where to play, to be honest.
I think it's safe to say it will not live up to the World Cup final.
Probably not.
I also think it's safe to say many of our hat tricks won't live up to the resume you've put together today. So Forrest, thank you for walking us down memory lane. And everyone out there, all our listeners, thank you for listening to this installation of the hat trick on the Meat Pies Pod. Please subscribe, leave us a review wherever you're listening. Everyone have a fantastic week. As always, up the pies. And thank you again, Forrest, for the delightful storytelling.
Up the pies. Been very fortunate, and thank you for hosting, Paul.
As always, baby.